night. Just a nice welcome from PNCFL and the conference committee. Our president, Lynn Johnston, is here, as well as President-elect Catherine Uslan. And my name is Brandon Locke. I'm the immediate past president of PNCFL. And also I am the director of world language and immersion programs in the Anchorage School District up in Anchorage, Alaska. And I have the honor and privilege of facilitating this morning's keynote conversation with three legends from the Pacific Northwest. It's very rare that we would be able to have access to three Actful past presidents in the same setting at the same time in a very informal conversation. And as you know, the Pacific Northwest Council for Languages represents 6 very, very large, diverse states. We have a huge, huge geographic span. And we were just talking before everyone joining in about how this virtual world has actually positively impacted some things, like getting these connections in place. And so we are definitely wanting to continue on PNCFL conference in the future, but we'll be also sending out an evaluation toward the end of the conference, and we'd love to hear your feedback, because even as things go back face to face, we may end up sticking with this type of a format for our region because we are so spread out. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you 3 Actful past presidents who are also past presidents of PNCFL. And so I'm going to start chronologically with Ann Tollefson from, I believe it's Story, but Casper, Wyoming, Casper area. She was the PNCFL president in 1992, as well as again in 2001. And she was the Actful president in 1997. Welcome, Ann. Ann is officially retired.
It's great to be here.
Oh, sorry, Ann. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Ann is retired from the Wyoming Department of Education and is a powerhouse not only in Wyoming and the Pacific Northwest, but throughout the entire country. Everyone knows Ann Tollefson, and anything related to language in the state of Wyoming, absolutely Ann. What she has been able to do in a state as rural as Wyoming has been just amazing. And on a personal note, Ann was one of the folks that convinced me to throw my name in the hat to run for PNCFL president the first time around, which was in 2002. Next, we have Barb Mondloch, who is a principal in Tacoma, Washington. She was PNCFL president in 2005 and Actful president in 2011. She is an elementary school principal and also a textbook author. Welcome, Barb. And finally, our most recent Actful president is Bridget Yaden. She is a professor of Spanish at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma and was PNCFL president in 2007, and of course was the most recent Actful president in 2020. And Bridget holds the title of being the only Actful president that has ever hosted and sponsored a fully virtual Actful convention. Welcome, Bridget, all 3 of you. So the keynote today is really questions for these 3 ladies. They actually sort of came up with the questions, and then I just sort of fine-tuned them. But really, it's an informal conversation with these 3, and you can tell over the span of their careers and the history of Actful and PNCFL, they were at the head of Actful at different times within our profession. And so getting their perspectives and also talking about how somebody from rural Wyoming becoming the president of Actful at the national level. So we'll start off. And again, if you have questions for the presenters, you can also pop those in the chat, and Catherine will be monitoring those for us. But I was just going to ask if Bridget, maybe if you could start off with just tell us a little bit about your leadership trajectory and what got you interested in language leadership.
Great, thanks for that, Brandon. And I'm glad you've asked me first, because actually I think my trajectory is exactly the same as Ann's and Barb's in many ways, right? So we all started off getting involved at our state level. I know Ann was very active and still is in Wyoming, Barb and I in Washington. So we were all on our state boards. And then we all served on the PNCFL board. I think, as you said, Brandon, we all served at some point as the president of PNCFL, sometimes more than once. And then we were all on the Actful board in different ways. I think we all were maybe a regional rep first and then became the president of Actful. And if you saw in the program, we actually have a fourth president from the Pacific Northwest. We had another POU professor back in the 70s, a French professor, Les McKim, who was president. So 4 Actful presidents in just over 50 plus years coming from the Pacific Northwest. So I say that because we have very similar trajectories, but I hope no one feels that you have to have gone through all of these steps to get involved at the national level. That's actually not the case, but it is a testament to the value of service at the local level. And I would just say that what got me involved was great mentors who probably didn't see themselves as mentors. So Paloma Borreguero was my mentor when I first started teaching at the University of Washington as a grad student. She sent me to my first professional conference ever, which was a PNCFL conference in Boise, Idaho. First time I ever flew on a plane to go somewhere for work. I mean, I felt really super grown up. And then I've just been a part of PNCFL and Waffled ever since. That was back in '92, to age myself a little bit. Barb also, we put our leadership trajectory side by side. I've like lockstep right behind her, and she's just been a model. So folks that have mentored me, whether they thought themselves as my official mentor or not, have really got me into leadership. And so I see lots of former students on this call. So I hope that we can all see ourselves as mentors in that way. So yeah.
Thank you, Bridget. Barb or Ann, do you want to add into that at all?
Sure. I think
I think
that
she said it all.
I'll just add that, like, when I became a language educator in Sandy, Oregon, I was a singleton, and I think a lot of people in our region know what it's like to be the only language teacher of their language in a school. And it's hard to not have that language partner. And somehow somebody hooked me up with Kohlfold, and I went to the my first year in October, I went to the Waffle-Kohlfold joint conference, and that like changed my life forever. I mean, I was so inspired and rejuvenated, and just having that exposure made me a better educator for the whole rest of my life. Like, I could never give it up. And I think that every time that I was, like Brandon said, I became a principal, I had the opportunity to work on textbook programs. And so I got to know more educators, and somebody through those networks, somebody tapped me on the shoulder to be on the Waffle board and run. I had never considered it. And I think, like, a lot of people are out there willing to serve, and all they need is like a little tap on the shoulder, or because we don't always see ourselves that way. We don't always realize how our strengths can contribute to the profession and how much we'll get back from that. And so that's just been a big part of my language leadership, just that very beginning and the connection with associations.
I appreciate that, Barb. That's great advice for our members. And you're right. I mean, a lot of times people aren't, born seeking a Actful presidency, but it is those conversations and those connections that happen along the way. I remember I was a very, very young educator and became the president of AFLA, not because I was seeking it, but literally because nobody else wanted it. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll do it. And then that turned into meeting Ann and Carl Falsgraf, and then becoming PNCFL president. And that was not in my original plans when I wanted to be a French teacher. So you're right, it's all about those connections. And these folks that we have known for many, many years and continue to meet and re-meet. And it's a wonderful network. It's a wonderful network. So thank you for that. Ann, do you want to add anything from your perspective?
I totally agree, but I think the piece that you all made was the mentor, right? All of us had someone who said, hey, have you thought about? And you have to understand that I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I remember somebody said, have you thought about PNCFL? And I said, what is that? I didn't even know what PNCFL was. They said, well, you should go to their conference. Well, the minute I went to the conference, I was trapped, right? But somebody at every level said, have you thought about this? And maybe that's what we need to do for each other. Have you thought about? So.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that's a great segue. And Bridget, you sort of alluded to this as well. But the next question that I have for you is, so clearly the Pacific Northwest has had an impact on the national level. So what would you say are some of the unique contributions from a Western perspective that our region has had on the profession? And Anne, I'm going chronologically here, but I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I had a really unique experience, and I think everyone out there will understand this. I had been asked by PNCFL to be the representative on the Actful board. And so my very first meeting, I had promised myself that I wasn't going to say anything. Now, anyone who knows me knows that that's impossible, but I promised myself I would just sit there and I would just listen until I got the lay of the land. So the very first item on the agenda was a lady from Minnesota who came in with a white paper that she was proposing to Actful about distance learning, which at that time nobody did, remember? That was 1995, I think. And she had done a lot of research. She did a great job, but I remember the discussion on the board. I'm sitting there dutifully listening, and one of the people said, well, why do they need to do distance learning? They can just drive to the next town. So, I said, I'm sorry, but in the area where I live, the next town may be 100 miles away. So, and I think that as we talked through it, then they approved it, and that became Actful's official white paper on distance learning. But it definitely came out of our region because nobody else had that experience at any other region. So that's just one experience.
Well, I think that's a really good point too, because again, that's just the mindset of other places in the country. Well, of course, you just go to the next town, and it's not an issue to drive 2 hours to a major city for a conference. Well, that's sort of impossible in our area. Barb, from your perspective, anything that you want to add from your time as Actful president?
Sure. I think that PNCFL brings kind of a Western ingenuity and creativity. Like you talked about earlier today, Brandon, we are so spread out. At least 3 of our states represent 3 of the 7 least populated states in the country, and it's expensive to travel. And so we have had challenges. A lot of the other regions make their money by their conventions, and it's so expensive for us to have an in-person convention. So again, I'm thrilled about this. But we don't have a huge funding source. And so we had to reinvent ourselves to stay alive. And I think that PNCFL connecting our membership to the state memberships has done that. Like, that's an example of our creativity. And other regions are interested in what we're doing and how we look at things differently. And so I just think that ingenuity is something that we can bring to the national level as well.
Thank you for that. And that's true. I feel like PNCFL is always having to reinvent ourselves. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's because of the sign of the times. And again, you're right. 3, what did you say? How many of the least populated states?
3 out of the 7.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, our region is also 3 different time zones too. So having to balance that out when we were planning this conference even is like, well, that's really too early in Alaska to get started but then again, it's later, of course, in mountain time. So thanks for that, Barb. Bridget, anything that you'd like to add from the very most recent perspective?
Yeah, I would. And one quick anecdote of this was when I was on an AATSP board meeting when I was our rep for Washington State. On that board, there was a conversation about AATSP needing to do something in the West because they'd been doing a lot of East Coast conferences. And they said, well, we'll go to Chicago next, and that'll be our West experience. So I'll never forget that. There's life west of the Mississippi, right? But I think I would, in addition to what Anne and Barb said, I would also add that there's a humility to us out in the West. And I was just making a list in my mind of things like you had mentioned Carl Falsgraf. He's from Oregon. The stamp test that it came out of our area. Washington State's been a leader in the seal of biliteracy. We weren't, of course, the first, but we are the state that has recognized the most number of languages, over 60 languages representing the seal of biliteracy. So we've done a lot in the West, but I don't think, and we don't need the recognition or want it, but it addresses our humility that we're not around reminding folks of how wonderful we are. We are out here because we are just wonderful, right?
That's true. That is true. And you're right. Thank you for pointing out the stamp test and coming out of the University of Oregon. You know, it's funny. I'm also on the board for NADSFL, which is the District Supervisor Association. And they always have a summer academy, and it's always on the East Coast. And next year I'm in charge of hosting that. And I said to the board, again, they're all from the East as well. What about Seattle? And they were all like, wait, what? I'm like, you guys, it's easy to get to Seattle. And then they were like, oh my gosh, yeah, we've never been there. Let's go. So maybe we'll get some more well-deserved recognition, even though we don't need it. Okay, the next question is also really interesting in terms of your span of time as the president of Actful. But what was, during your time, what was one of the biggest challenges as Actful president, and how did you address it, and what did you learn from that experience, and how did that help shape, you know, further decisions in your leadership? And yeah, go ahead, Barb. Thanks.
At least when I was president, I'm not sure, we might have more board meetings now that they're virtual, but we had basically 2 big board meetings. And one was in May, and then we had the one at the convention. And so my first big board meeting, about 1/3 of the board is new at your first meeting. And so they had just met me, and we found ourselves in the position of needing a new executive director. And so that was really a surprise and disruptive, but the staff like really stepped up, and I feel like it didn't impact our members at all. They like held it together while we did a national search for a new executive director. And it gave us an opportunity to become really clear about what we wanted in an executive director and how we could find someone to help us bring our goals and our mission and our strategic plan to life. And also to just like strengthen the relationships with our partner organizations. And so we looked at it, you know, it was like every problem has a gift for you in its hands. And in this case, I think it was even better than I could have dreamed, because while we did a national search, we ended up finding someone right in our midst, Marty Abbott, who had been an Actful president, who did work on the Actful staff as the education director, I think her title was, and she had incredible relationships with our partners and knew how to advocate and was articulate and deep understanding of language. So that was like such a thrill that she was willing to be the next executive director. I think I learned a couple of things about leadership from that. And one of them was the importance of listening to all stakeholders, listening with an open heart, hearing what everyone has to say, and how it matters in any form of leadership, as a classroom teacher, as a principal, as a president of an association. And the other thing I learned is the value of being courageous. Sometimes being courageous feels like, you know, jumping off a cliff and not knowing if your parachute's gonna work, but it always pays off. So it was a good lesson at that time too.
Thanks, Barb. And that must have been a huge challenge, especially with the limited face-to-face meetings. And again, being in the Pacific Northwest and having to fly east to find a new executive director and lead the charge. Anne, what about you during your time?
I'm going to go way back, remember? And when I was president of Actful, we were really an East Coast organization. I think nobody had ever heard of Wyoming, first of all. They were like, where is that? And I think more importantly, that almost all of the decisions were made by our executive director at that time. And it was really hard to try and force the organization to change. And I listened to Barb and I see Bridget, because we really had to push hard to get the board to have any say on anything, right? We were just kind of decorative, or to get the president to be able to say anything. And it was an interesting thing, bringing the West to Actful, first of all, and then asking for more input. And eventually, when we made that break, was right when I was president, we started looking at going to Washington. And that's when the organization matured and changed, right? But our challenges were just simply trying to get our word in. And I love what you said, Barb, about being courageous, because that can be pretty ugly sometimes, pretty hard, but it works. So anyway, that was way back when. I think Bridget, she is the product of all the work that we've done. So Bridget.
And I was going to say, I know, Bridget, you have talk about being courageous, but what you have done with Actful this past year has just been amazing. So yeah, let's turn it over to you.
Well, I appreciate it. And I mean, it's a team effort. As Barb said, the staff, the Actful staff are amazing. Howie's on the call. Jessica Haxey's on the call today, our current president. Julia Richardson, the convention chair, who, oh my gosh, if you've never met Julia, she is a force of nature. So yeah, we had great board, great staff, but I can sum up my biggest challenge in one word, which is 2020. I think for the rest of my life, I'll just be able to say 2020 and everyone will know what I mean. But so that was really having to pivot, right, in the middle of your year. As I think both Ann and Barb said, you know, I never saw myself as someday I'm going to be Actful president. But you know, when I finally was Actful president, I was so excited for the year to get to go around the country with Howie and visit all the regions and really just engage face to face. And that ended so quickly on March 18th when we were at Central States Conference in Minneapolis, is when the world shut down. We had to fly home early because I was worried I wouldn't be able to get home. And so what I learned about leadership is I learned to grieve really quickly losses of what I had hoped would happen, and then see the opportunities. Because I have to tell you, and I don't want to get too teary-eyed here, it ended up being an amazing year. Of course, I sat in my office in my home the rest of the year, but the convention that we were able to put together was so accessible. Folks being able to access such great PD for months, not just for 3 days, didn't have to travel. The Assembly of Delegates was an amazing, amazing opportunity that again was super accessible. It helped us really make a lot of movement on our strategic plan pillar of equity, inclusion, and diversity. If you weren't able to attend the Assembly of Delegates, we had great conversations and great planning about how Actful and the rest of us can be leaders on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So seeing the opportunities, once you get past, you have to grieve. It felt like we all had losses this last year, and you know, knock on wood, I'm lucky that was my only loss was a professional loss, and it ended up being just an amazing year for Actful.
Nice, thank you, Bridget. And you mentioned flexibility, and why don't you just tell our members where you are right this very second? Like, what are you, where are you? What are you in?
I'm in a camper, so that was instead of traveling the rest of the year with Actful, I bought a camper and traveled the state safely with my son and my husband and my dog who's sitting next to me. So I'm in a campground about 2 hours from home, because you know, my son's doing school online, I'm teaching online. I haven't been in my office since last March. So flexibility, right? You've got to see the silver lining, otherwise well, it's too sad.
Thanks for that. And folks, if you wouldn't mind just putting your view on speaker view, because I think we have 5 different screens here, but I wanted to just take a quick second to do a shout out. I appreciate the reminder, Bridget, but Howie Berman is the executive director of Actful, and he is on this call with us. So Howie, could you just say a little quick welcome to the folks?
Oh, hi. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I am, you know, Jessica Haxey and I just had a session actually earlier, and I was saying how excited I was the fact that you all are having this opportunity to meet. It's the regional conferences are so important. It's a great opportunity for you all to collaborate, to learn, to share, you know, obviously to share. And I'm just honored that I can be part of it, and see you all. And yes, I'm wearing my Seattle Seahawks bow tie that Bridget gave me. This was a gift from her. So I'm repping PNCFL. But yeah, we're so delighted to be able to support the region and be part of this conference, and so excited that you all are even though we can't be together face to face, getting this opportunity to see each other, even if it's on Zoom. So thank you so much for allowing us to be part of it, and whatever we can do to support the region, we're happy to do that. So thanks.
Thank you, Howie, and welcome. Glad to have you here. And on that note, also, we have the current Actful president, Jessica Haxey. Jessica, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can you say a few words?
Hi, Brandon. Hi, everyone. It's just a thrill to be here. Of course, I'm in Connecticut, so it's my very first PNCFL. Like Bridget, I really wish I was there with you in person and sharing handshakes and hugs and things and lunches and dinners, but here we are. And I guess I didn't have to travel in so many airplanes as a result. So maybe that's a tiny silver lining, but actually like Bridget, I was looking forward to it. So thrilled to be with you during the last session, and looking forward to seeing some of you later on this afternoon too. Thanks so much. I have learned so much from Bridget and Barb and they're all just incredible leaders, and how lucky you are to have them in your region. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks. And Brandon too. He's pretty good also, I've heard.
Thanks, Jessica. And you're virtually in six Western states right now. So thanks for being here.
Who else can say that, really? So
exactly.
In Connecticut right now, I mean, right.
Again, thanks, Howie and Jessica, for being here with us. Okay, so Anne, I'm going to start with you again chronologically here, but how has the role of Actful president evolved as the organization has evolved over the years from your perspective? And I know that you touched on that a little bit, but if you want to just share a little bit more.
Well, I think that when I was president so long ago, that the role of the president was mainly advisory. We didn't have a lot of decision making, we didn't have the support and the input that the current presidents have. We were working toward it, but we did not have it. And I always think of one example that is just, that's why I have white hair. At our convention, I had to go on, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Maya Angelou thing. But so we had a convention, and it was in gorgeous Nashville. Ugh. And I had to give this speech. And so, I see these current presidents and I see their speeches, and I know they've got a teleprompter, right? And they have a big thing behind them, and they have all this technical support. I was given an 8-page typed script with all kinds of little scribbles on the edge. Now, if that doesn't give you white hair, I don't know what will. And I think that the role of the president has become so much more important as a face of the organization, as representatives of all the members that we have. And it's exciting. And we have people from different parts of the country, not all from the East Coast and the Midwest. So it has really changed, Brandon. It really has, and all for the good, all for the good.
And this is Debbie Kelly in Montana, and I was at that conference. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't remember that you were there, but I remembered Maya Angelou.
I'll tell you a story about her in a minute.
Barb, what about you?
I totally agree with Anne. I think that the role of president has expanded. We have more efficacy and voice, and it's not just doing what an executive director is trying to guide us to do, but it's a true collaboration. So working with Marty and with Howie, totally a true collaboration.
And Bridget?
I would echo what Anne and Barb have both said. And because of that, the great relationship that I have with the executive director and the board and the staff really allows the president to feel like we have a voice. We do have a voice, and we get a lot of really great work done. I would uplift the strategic plan. If you haven't seen it, it's really, the work of the strategic planning over the past few years has really come to fruition in terms of it being the document that really guides the work. And equity, diversity, inclusion is its own pillar, but also throughout the document. I would also uplift that, all of this trajectory that you see through Anne and Barb and now up to 2021 with Jessica led us to a rebrand last year. So if you didn't notice or didn't know, Actful rebranded last year. We are no longer, we are Actful. We don't say the foreign, we don't say that F word anymore. We are really seen as and we see ourselves as a leader, not just nationally, but internationally. And then I love the tagline of Language Connects. So that was really, that's taken us 50 plus years to this new rebrand.
Awesome, thanks. So we have 5, at least for me, for my Zoom, I've got 5 screens here, and I just want to take a quick second. If you are currently or have served on your state board, if you could just literally raise your hand, your real hand, not your Zoom hand, and hold it there for a second. We're going to just flip through. I just want you to see how many people have been involved with their state association on the board level. Awesome, that's great. And put your hands down. And now, if you have been involved with the PNCFL board in any capacity, raise your hand. Awesome, awesome. Thanks. All right, so I'm sure that as your years as president, there may have been at least one funny moment, right? Probably. So Anne, do you have, I mean, you laughed first, so you get to go first. What was a funny moment from your perspective?
So Deborah mentioned this, that big convention when we had Maya Angelou, and I'll make this as brief as I can because I knew Maya before she was our speaker. She'd actually had dinner at my house right after the publication of I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings. So I thought I knew her pretty well, right? So I went backstage before she was ready to go on, and there was such a big audience, they had an extra room. So there was a huge audience. And I said, Maya, is there anything I can get you? And she said, I need a screwdriver. So being a Western woman, I'm thinking, well, maybe her glasses need repairing, or I don't know. So I'm frankly going through, where could I get a screwdriver? Well, they have hammers, maybe. And she finally looked at me, she said, Anne, I need a drink. A screwdriver. So I got her 2 screwdrivers, and trust me, she was well oiled when she went on stage and did a tremendous presentation. And it was all because I got her 2 screwdrivers. Okay, so that's my funniest moment.
That's funny. Now, were they both liquid, or was one of them an actual tool?
They were both liquid.
That's why she was well oiled. There we go.
I learned quickly.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Barb, what about you? Can anything funny come to mind?
Well, I think sometimes intense experiences at the time, when you look back, they can be funny. And I had a lot of those, but I'm really not at liberty to share them. So I'm going to pass it on to Bridget.
Smart move. Thank you.
Well, that's good, Barb, because I have 2 quick ones, and one I think involves you, but I'm trying to remember. So one is a regional one, and I'm sorry, my dog is making noise in the background. The PNCFL board meeting in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Back then, Greg Hopper-Moore was the executive director. We had Robert Davis, Manley Getler, Brenda was there, Barb was there, and Greg was the only one with a rental car as executive director, and he needed to get something at a store late night. And there were at least 6 or 7 of us, maybe 8, in this little 4-door car piled on top of each other, driving around Jackson Hole to find a store. So that was fun. I promised the driver was sober. And then the other one is kind of funny and kind of sad, and Howie was there. So as you may not know, the president of Actful gets to meet with the Secretary of Education during JNCL days. Well, last February 2020 in Washington, D.C., think of the context, what was happening. We were there when the first impeachment trial was happening. And so when we were going to meet with Betsy DeVos, which we were all interested in the meeting, all of the secretaries had been called to the White House. Yeah, we were all been called to the White House because the president was giving a talk and went really off script. According to all the staffers, he's gone off script. He's gone off script. So DeVos was never able to come back to meet with us. So we got to meet with the Deputy Secretary Zace, who said to our teacher of the year, Rebecca Bluewolf, something along the lines of, if my French teacher were as pretty as you, I think I would have continued taking French.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Howie might remember the exact words he said, but something along those lines.
I think I blacked out after that moment, actually.
So I have a funny moment that I want to share, and it actually involves Howie. And Howie, I don't know that I've actually ever told you this, but I know it's about Barb and Bridget and Ann, but this is a funny one. When it was at the Actful convention where you had like knee surgery or something, you were in a wheelchair.
Oh yes, I had a back issue and I was in a scooter. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I happened to be sitting by the PNCFL booth at the time. I mean, I wasn't with Howie. He was somewhere. But Lauren, our executive director for PNCFL, was also in a wheelchair for health issues, but she had left. And I was exhausted from standing. So I just sat down in her chair for a second. And then somebody comes up to me and starts talking to me as if we were like best friends. And they were just talking and talking and talking. And I was like, I was so confused, but I didn't know how to say, who are you? But if you look at Howie's head and my head, and that we're both got glasses and stuff, I stood up out of the wheelchair and the lady's like, oh my God, you're not Howie. And I thought, well, I had no idea that you thought I was Howie. Otherwise I would have said something 10 minutes ago, but there we go.
I never heard this story. Did you find out who this was?
I don't remember who it was.
That's really funny. How about that?
I think they were mortified and they just like disappeared.
Yeah.
All right, so Barb, Bridget, or Ann, I'm just going to open this up to all three of you and just jump in. But what is one misconception that you feel folks may have about Actful, and something that they might be surprised to learn about the organization?
I can start. I think I had this misconception, and maybe I still do. So I used to think you kind of had to know somebody to get involved in Actful. You either had to be a big name yourself, because I mean, Ann Tollefson, Barb Mondloch, you had to be this big name, or you had to know somebody, and that is definitely not the case. So I would say two things. One, the sitting around the table, I still have imposter syndrome when I'm sitting in a room with Howie and with Jessica, and you're sitting with Paul Sandrock. You're like, I still pinch myself every day. I really do. But Actful folks are just the most down-to-earth, real people, really, truly. And it's a very accessible organization. We're actually in the process now of, last year we changed our award system so that folks could self-nominate for the awards. Our nominating procedure for running for the board now will include self-nominations. You don't need to be a big name or know someone. I definitely had neither when I started to get involved in Actful. So I think that's a big misconception.
I'll go next. Mine's on a little lower scale than Bridget's. I totally agree with everything Bridget said. I always agree with what Bridget says. She is truly a wonderful, amazing human being. But one of the things that I got the most questions about as president was they were around the convention. And I had been the program chair for a couple of years. And people wanted to know, like, why are there two sessions that have similar content at this time slot? And then this other time slot, there aren't any sessions. And I think that one of the things that people don't know is how you can get on the program, but also how the program is organized. So to get on the program, you just submit your submission and on time, and then it goes through a review process. And now it's a blind review. And so they're selected based on the criteria in the rubric. So that's not a big surprise. But what I think most people might not realize is that about 2/3 of the presentations are Actful presentations. And then the other third, 28%, are from our partner associations, and about 5% are from our special interest groups. And then of course there are the exhibitor sessions that they pay for. But so Actful, the convention committee gets together after we have all of our sessions selected, and then we make sure with Julia Richardson, who's like a guru, a convention guru, I worship her. She makes sure, and we make sure that languages are spread across each session, and the levels and content and all the different categories. But the other third of the sessions, we don't control. Hate that word control, but we're not in charge of. And so they have time slots, but the other associations get to pick what goes in there. So that's why sometimes you're in program and you're like, I don't know how to choose between these two sessions. Why are they at the same time? And it's because we aren't all reviewing all of them. We're reviewing 2/3 of them. So that's just something that sometimes people are curious about.
So Brandon, I'm going to go way back out.
Go ahead.
Because I have a bi-monthly Zoom with some of my former Actful president buddies. And I asked him this question. I said, you know, we're going to do this. And what would you say that you did not expect? And we all agreed that it's the bonds that you make with people from all over the country, right? So when you're in your local, you have all these wonderful bonds, and I think we have regional bonds, but when you go to Actful, you meet people who have similar interests from all over the country, and you end up making new friends. And so that's something I didn't expect. The first time I went to an Actful convention, Howie, it was in New York, and I didn't know one person. I sat in my hotel room the whole time, except when I went to a session. Not one person ever said welcome. Wow. Now, that's not true anymore. I mean, people really take care of each other. So that's all I would say about that question.
Jessica, I'm just going to put you on the spot for a second. As our current president, do you have anything that you want to add to that question?
I think that a lot of what Barb said would have been the things that I would have brought up first. Like, I really did not know a lot about the convention approval process, and the part about the blind review. I think it's really important that we have that process in place, and that people understand that they have no idea who wrote that proposal when they're choosing the proposals. So it really is a very pure process where they're just looking at the content. And then other than that, yeah, we really hope that the direction we're moving in terms of our awards, like Bridget said, and nominations process for the board itself will make it more transparent to everyone, that you don't have to, you don't have to know someone or just, get tapped. Like, you're going to be able to self-nominate. And we have been working, Bridget and Victoria Russell, who's the incoming president after me, and I have been working on rubrics so you can see what is expected too of a board member, and what's expected of the application to sort of be on the board. So I think it'll all be a lot more transparent, because I do think that's been an issue where people would look at it from afar and think, "Ooh, I'll never get asked to do that." And that's not at all the way we want it to be. We want everyone's brain power at every level. And the other thing I just learned is that in Actful Central, which is, it's sort of like where our communities are, our online communities, you don't have to be a member to participate in those communities. You can get a login and participate in some of the communities are closed because it's the special interest groups and you have to be members of those, but many of them are open and you can connect with other educators. So you just go to Actful Central. You can just Google it and go right to it and make yourself a login and get involved. I learned that 4 days ago. I thought you had to be a member, so.
Thanks, Jessica. And you bring up a really good point, because I do know that regardless of Actful, when some people are uncomfortable with self-nominating for something. And I think that you just really explained well why it's okay to do that. So thank you for that.
Sure.
We're getting close to time. We've got 2 questions left. I want to, for Barb, Bridget, and Ann, I'm going to actually go to the last question first, so that we can end on something more positive here. But this question is, because the nationwide elimination of language teacher preparation programs and language teachers in some cases, and even language programs, how does advocacy play into this? And Ann, I'm going to have you start with that one.
Yeah, again, I ran this by some other past presidents, and we talked about that. And this is happening all over the country, right? When teacher preparation programs are being eliminated. The University of Wyoming just eliminated them for French, German, and Spanish, which was the only ones they had. And so you have this sense of outrage. I have to do something. Well, what are you going to do? We're trying on the national level for sure. And we have some good lobbying there. But the problem is that when you talk to them, so like I called the dean of the Arts and Science College at the University of Wyoming, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, We looked at the numbers. We looked at numbers. We have to cut, and they have the fewest majors in those three, and a couple in a social studies thing, et cetera. So, and you can't argue with that. They're facing budget cuts. You know, what do you do? So I started thinking about Candide. I'm sorry, you guys, French teacher. And, you know, going all over the world, trying to find the happiness and the answers to everything. And in the end, the answer is, il faut cultiver votre jardin. You have to work in your own little garden. So I would even go down below the state to the local in the classroom. If we have really excellent programs and excellent things that inspire kids and get them motivated, then we're going to start recruiting teachers. And when kids want to be a teacher, then they're going to put the demand on those universities, and some of those programs will be saved. But I just don't think, I think that's where we have to cultivate our own gardens. Start at the local level, right? In your school, and then the states. But anyway, that would be my advice. That's what we got.
And Barb, you also have the unique lens of being a school administrator and having to hire teachers when there's also a teacher shortage. So what are your thoughts about that?
The struggle is real. And we're trying to build more dual language immersion programs across our state, across the country. People are starting to understand how important it is to have sustained sequences of language learning and how it's an equity issue. And it's so exciting, but it's a big barrier not to be able to find language educators to teach them. And for dual language, it's extra tricky because it's not, and I don't want to say just, but it's not just a world languages teaching certificate. You have to have elementary educator certification and be fluent in another language. And I think the biggest hope while we're waiting for everything to catch up is kind of growing your own and starting at the local level. When I was a high school Spanish teacher, we had a program at the elementary schools. I was like, I want to bring languages to the elementary schools, but all I have are Spanish students. So, okay, let's do it. And I had enough support where we got to teach in 2 schools, we got to teach Spanish. And those kids out of that one cohort, 6 of them became language educators at some point in time. And that was more than all the rest of my, cohorts combined. So, or maybe not, but close. But then, so that's one way of growing your own. Another way is to find fluent people in your community and then help mentor them and nurture them through a program. And then when we were working on dual language in our district, Bridget was on my committee, thankfully, and we were trying to develop like a K-16 program to grow language educators. So they train at PLU, they student teach in our district, and then we can grow some of our own language educators. So like Anne, I think we need to start local, but we also do need that advocacy at the state and national level too. And that can be uncomfortable. I hated it at first, it was scary, but once you do it, like anything, it's easier and it's worthwhile too.
Good point, thank you. Bridget, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would add, I agree, growing your own. So some things I was thinking of listening to Anne and Barb was, I think the seal of biliteracy is really promising. Our university now is starting to track the students that are coming in with the seal. So we know who are our bilingual students coming in already. So then we could track, connect with them, not just to get them into our upper division classes for those numbers that really do matter when cuts start happening, but also to encourage them to consider teaching as a profession. We have the exponential growth in alternative routes to certification. Those are the only candidates I work with anymore. So I think investing good resources and good mentoring through alternative routes to certification are important. I would uplift Actful's Educators Rising modules that are available. I piloted them a few years ago with my students, and it's a way to get students as young as middle school really to start seeing themselves as potential teachers in the future. And there's specific modules for world languages that Actful's created. And then just finally, at the national level, reminder that we do have Actful and very accessible. I emailed Howie because we're about to lose 40 faculty at my university, which means we're probably going to cut all our language programs, but Spanish actually. So 6 of our languages going away. Howie wrote an amazing letter within like 24 hours and sent it to our president, and our provost was able to talk about the teacher shortage, talk about the importance of language study, liberal arts, humanities, talk about the business report. That's another great advocacy piece that Actful really invested a lot of time and money in a few years ago. The business report showing how businesses need bilingual employees. So don't forget that we have Actful, and they really are just a click away. Howie will respond to you, and wrote that letter. And I hope, I'll let you all know. I'll report back and see how it goes. We'll know within a few weeks what happens. So thank you again, Howie, for that letter.
So Howie, this is Ann. So let's say I'm trying to do something at the University of Wyoming. Could I write you then and have you respond and write a letter to the dean there? I mean, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
See,
but this is happening everywhere.
Right? Unfortunately, I'm doing more and more of it lately.
Yeah, that's really.
Our last question, actually, somebody sent one in the chat that might be even more interesting, but it was really, if you could give a word of advice or encouragement to someone interested in potentially taking the next step in their leadership, what would that be? Bridget, I'm going to start with you.
Just volunteer to do, I mean, little things really matter. Volunteer to, write a short little paragraph for your regional state newsletter or for the lingo. Get involved in LIL. You heard a plug for that last night at the membership meeting. LIL is a wonderful opportunity for growing leadership within a cohort of world language teachers, right? So like-minded people. And I would say, Howie, that I think LIL had its roots perhaps in the West with a little program called WIL, at least the idea. So that's another plug for our work out here in the West. So that's another thing. If you need more information on that, check out LIL. Lynn presented on it last night.
Thanks. What about you, Barb?
I agree with Bridget. I just want to say, just do it. And you can start small or you can start big, but the payback is so immense. And being with people who are passionate about the same things you are. And I got to give a plug for language educators. I've worked with a lot of different departments, and we are the most fun and so passionate and equity driven. And so it pays back. It's a big time commitment. It can be, depending on the level of investment and hard work, but it's just so meaningful. And it's one of the best things I've ever been able to do.
And I'm going to ask it that you take a slightly different spin on that question. And what you have the most longevity with both PNCFL and Actful. What advice do you have for PNCFL moving forward?
Well, I think PNCFL has a huge role to play in our region, right? And I'm hoping that this conference, this virtual conference, can tie us back together. I think all of our state associations really rely on PNCFL, and hopefully that tie between with the state organizations and PNCFL will stay there. And PNCFL does have representation on the Actful board, which is the only way from our region that we really get to say something, and we have a role and we have a vote. So I don't know. I remember this. I know you guys are saying I'm old, so I remember, but I remember sitting in a bar in Tacoma with Carl Falsgraf when we decided we had to do something to save PNCFL. And he and I sat there and figured out how we would do that, because we were really worried that PNCFL was going to go under. And I'm really proud of what you're doing right now, that you have this conference, that we have a chance to keep going. And I agree with what both Bridget and Barb said. Just do it. Go out and volunteer, say you'll do anything, write a newsletter, every state association needs help. And then when you get in the state, then you can move up. So that would be I'm just really proud of PNCFL right now, because at any moment we could have gone under. Trust me. Because we used to have a lot more states. Remember, Hawaii was part of PNCFL.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
Things have changed, but we have stayed alive, and that's wonderful.
Thank you, Ann. Somebody at one point recently just sent me an email asking how we can convince, and Howie and Jessica, this is for you. How can we get Hawaii back into our region? We'd like to officially propose that. We are very much running out of time. I want to thank Ann and Barb and Bridget so very much for spending this time with us. And Also Jessica and Howie for their cameo appearances. Thank you so much for that. And I'm just so very thankful for your leadership over the years and for taking the time to spend with our members today. For those of you that weren't with us last night, just a reminder that if you are a member of your state association, Alaska, Wyoming, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, or Montana, you are automatically a member of PNCFL. We're one of the only regional associations that has that type of a membership sort of setup. And so that's how you're able to access this conference for free. And and this came out in the chat today, or the conversation today, I should say, that we are a very geographically diverse region, and we really do rely on each other. And so we want to keep this momentum going. And as Anne said, we are always restructuring and trying to invent ourselves. And so hang in there with us, and don't be afraid of jumping in and helping out with leadership in one capacity, in some capacity or another. So thank you for that. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back to Lynn Johnston, our current president, if she has any announcements or anything before moving to the next sessions.
I just want to remind everybody that post on Flipgrid, we're connecting. Anybody who makes the most connections wins a Amazon gift card. Also, we have our raffle tonight, but we have some fabulous language luncheons coming up. Another session, language luncheons. Grab your lunch and join a language luncheon, and our sunset chat with our advocacy and our raffle. So I just want to remind everybody about that. So, and I think we have another round of sessions here pretty soon.
And Lynn, if I could just jump in one more time here, again, for folks new to the conference today, if you are interested in receiving if you are interested in earning one graduate credit through the University of Alaska, you can do so. You don't have to be a resident of Alaska. It's $104 for a professional level graduate credit for your participation in the conference. Feel free to send me an email. And that is, my email address is in the program, but I can then send you the information on how you would register. And I just put it in the chat as well. So thank you.
Brandon, we do have a couple of videos from our sponsors that I would like to play if we have a couple of minutes here before the thing, but you'll have to share your screen with me.
I would be happy to do that, Catherine. Let's see here.
I think we have a couple of minutes here before the next session starts, and
Lynn, you are now able to share your screen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Catherine.
All right, so where is that little thing here? All right, so yeah, again, just a couple of sponsors that I want to recognize, and again, thank you for being here. And Vista's number one. So let's close my screen here.
Language learning is all about communication, and students need as many opportunities as possible to practice speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills. VHL Central offers several ways for students to learn, practice, and connect using the language, starting with our vocabulary and grammar tutorials. Using humor and a variety of teaching techniques, tutorials engage and teach students basic concepts, allowing them to self-assess and review at their own pace. Language production can be intimidating for many students, so we created video virtual chat activities. Students join simulated conversations and respond to a series of prompts, helping students to build confidence in a low-stakes environment and preparing them for face-to-face communication. Partner chat activities allow students to carry out live, synchronous conversations in pairs. This chat tool provides the elements of true interpersonal communication, conversational collaboration, spontaneity, creativity, and negotiation of meaning. All our communication tools are easy to use. No plugins or special software required. Teachers can review conversations and provide feedback directly to students. Vista Higher Learning's digital communication tools provide students with the flexibility and support they need to be successful in and out of the classroom. To learn more or request a demo of any of our programs, visit us at vistahigherlearning.com.
Okay, and one more from Avant.
My STAMP story began in 2009. We have offered testing to thousands of students in Washington State, and STAMP has been one of our main tests. STAMP is a really easy test for us to use because it's delivered online. It includes the skills that we would like to cover, reading and writing and listening and speaking, and it's available in some of the major languages that we have in our state. This testing is done for students who have primarily our English language learner students or immigrants to our state, for example, but also students who have learned the language almost anywhere. STAMP is also a very important part of our testing in Seattle Public Schools for our dual immersion programs in Spanish, Japanese, and Mandarin. We've really appreciated the fact that we have an external proficiency assessment to offer so that we can check the validity of our targets that we've set for our students across grades. We test at 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. And at 8th grade, our students are able to earn competency-based credits. So they have those credits going into high school and to help with placement decisions. So we've really enjoyed using STAMP over the years. As I've said, we have administered it to thousands of students by now. And it's a great product, and Avant Assessment has been a very easy testing partner to work with.
This is our STAMP story. So we started using STAMP at the end of our intermediate sequence. We're from a community college, so we have beginner and intermediate, first year and second year. The first time that we did STAMP for Spanish, I was very surprised at the results. They weren't quite where we wanted them to be. We met and talked about what changes we could make to our curriculum and what changes we could make to our program to help our students reach the level of proficiency we wanted them to reach. We've done STAMP, I think, 3 times since then, and we have seen our students' proficiency consistently go up since that first time and since making those changes, and it's really awesome.
Okay, and again, just a couple of announcements here.
Quality writing makes your schoolwork better and helps you stand out in the process. Meet
the video. So today, again, we had thank you to our fabulous keynote speakers. That was awesome, inspiring. We have our language luncheons this afternoon, followed by a little Zumba session from 1:15 to 1:30, quick little warm pickup. Our sunset chat with Brandon and Amanda Seawald, and our raffle at 6:30. And again, if you're interested in university credit, that's available. And clock hours information is in the program. And we're trying to record, encourage presenters to record. Sometimes they forget. And connect with us on social media. And and Flipgrid. And we will see you later for our closing raffle and evaluation. So thank you very much for being here. And our next session starts in a few minutes. So you have time to go to Flipgrid. That's all I got.